to kill this story, and what he should have done from the beginning is just say, it's a gift between governments. I'm merely the elected president right now. This thing's not going to go to Donald J. Trump org or the Trump Presidential Library.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today we've had Garrett Ziegler on the show. He's a former advisor in Donald Trump's first term way back when. He's joined us to discuss Trump's trip to the Middle East, what the United States will get out of it, what these countries could get out of an investment with the United States. Trump apparently wants to come home with about $1 trillion worth of commitments to investments. We also speak to him about the trip to Turkey, whether Donald Trump will join Putin and Zelenskyy in this face-to-face showdown. So we'll see if that even actually occurs. But Trump says, look, he might make it. So all that today on the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube. Garrett Ziegler, a former advisor under the Trump administration. Thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you very much, Maddie.
We're going to get into this trip in the Middle East that Donald Trump has arrived. He's in Saudi right now. He's going on a tour of the Middle East. He's going to Saudi. He's going to Qatar. He's going to the United Arab Emirates. What do you think Donald Trump is aiming to get out of this tour? He says he wants to come home with around $1 trillion worth of investments and joint interests with his Middle East friends. So what's the aim of this trip, do you think?
I think number one is to get commitments that they're not going to basically collude to keep gas prices high. I think if you go back on the campaign and you had a searchable basically block of text of what he talked about on almost every single stop, it's partially to do with gas prices. And I think that along with the $1 trillion in pledges, because that's what he's going to have to, come home with is pledges. Very, very rarely can you get cash in a bank account that quickly. So he's going to have to be content with pledges from all of these Middle Eastern princes. But a very concrete deliverable is to get those per gallon prices down to $2.50, because even though the groceries have gone down in the United States, gas prices are still at Biden levels, and this is to use a phrase, sort of the breadbasket of oil in the world. And geopolitically, that's the one thing that they can offer us. Now, as an American, I hate that this is the status quo. I hate that they have power over the oil price, because that means we need them. However, for the foreseeable future, until we are self-sufficient in that regard, which I think we could be, he has to do something about gas prices. And the only way to do that is to make sure that OPEC doesn't collude and cut production to keep oil prices artificially high.
Yeah, and I think, Garrett, a lot of people would look at this situation and find it kind of confusing, because we've had this president say that he wants to drill, baby, drill. He wants to tap into all that oil within the United States to make it less reliant on overseas. One of them, of course, which is Saudi. They want to stop paying for overseas oil. They want to be able to tap into their own resources. This is something that Joe Biden couldn't do because of his climate change commitments. Donald Trump, of course, doesn't have the same commitments. So for someone who was a bit unaware of why he's trying to kind of polish these relationships when it comes to oil, it is because, as you mentioned, for the next however long, he's going to have to make sure that the price of oil does stay, less expensive than it has been.
Yes, and if somebody follows him on True Social, so if I am British and I'm looking at this from afar, Trump is not going to use that sort of language on True Social. I'm not alleging that I'm his decoder or that I can peer inside his mind. I just know what he did in the first term, which is you have to put pressure on these guys to basically not extract monopoly profits, because the way they did it under Joe Biden and every other American president, including George W. Bush and Barack Obama, is through OPEC to keep production low, because if production is low, that's going to keep the prices high. This is basic econ 101. So, but if they follow him on True Social or any other social media, he's not going to put it in those terms, and he's not going to lay out the strategy of short term, medium term, long term. Yes, long term, as you said, he wants to, just taking him at his word in every single thing he's done at the Energy Department in the last 115 days. He does want to increase production, but he can't do that until, years down the road. So in the short term, he has to get on a plane and try to figure out what they want from us. What we can sort of barter with them, and what is more valuable to them than monopoly profits on oil. And we have a ton of stuff that they want. Most of all, for Qatar, it's not to get blockaded by all these other Gulf states. They want legitimacy. So if the United States isn't mad at them, they're going to be able to get along better. We all saw, I was in the White House in 2019 when all that was going down with the Emir. Nobody was talking to them. The commercial airliners weren't allowed to go through Qatar airspace. That's what they want to avoid and that's why they're giving the plane to the United States. Is they want to stay in his good graces.
Well, we'll get into the plane debacle a little bit later. But you mentioned that Donald Trump's going to the Middle East because he's basically saying, what do you want from us for this to be a joint venture, a joint partnership, so it's not so much the United States relying on them? Because, of course, that is his literal pet peeve. We've seen that through the tariffs. Donald Trump basically wants any sort of investments to be equal between two parties. He never wants the US relying on another country. And it is, of course, a great tactic. I think anyone could take a leaf out of his book in the way in which he does the strategy. That's up for negotiation. But you mentioned this investment. So Trump's gone over there with a lot of his delegations. He's got an entire fleet of people that have gone with him. But interesting, he's brought quite a few guests, men and women in the business area of the United States. He's brought the CEO of Amazon, the CEO of OpenAI, the CEO of Coke, the CEO of Uber. These are just a few that he's brought. So why is it important for Donald Trump to bring these people to these meetings?
Well, I can only say why I think it's important for him, because I'm not sure I agree with it. But I think that his thinking is that it's going to show the counterparts on the other side of the table that it's not just a one-off, that this is not just a heavy-handed American president. There is trillions of dollars of wealth behind his strategies. It's not just, they can't hope to just wait him out, that this is only a U.S. government-led push for other countries to pick up the slack. It's industry as well. And Bezos, he represents a couple $1 trillion in market cap. That is, in the course of human history, an astronomical scale. Besides Apple and Microsoft, there's few companies. I mean, even Saudi Aramco, the state-owned oil company, we all know about it. They aren't as valuable if you factor in, current prices and assuming their financials are transparent. They're not as valuable as Amazon. That's an insane proposition. So he wants more people on our side of the table, I think, to bolster his negotiating position. I'm not sure I would bring him, but I just think that he's always talking about them, and I listen to his every single word.
As your former boss. Garrett, let's get into this nuclear situation over in the Middle East as well. On the eve of Donald Trump going to the Middle East, he'd already sent his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, over to Amman for a fourth round of discussions with Iran over its nuclear weapons program. Now, Iran has always denied that they have nuclear weapons. They say that they have a nuclear program for civilian purposes, but the watchdog says that they're not very convinced that that's true. They think that they're basically building up an entire nuclear weapons program themselves. Can you walk me through why it's important for the US and why Steve Witkoff has entered these talks and a fourth talk to get Iran to stop with their nuclear program, alleged?
Well, I think like the North Korean issue and the madman over there, the stakes are too high for hubris. With somebody who is not a potential nuclear power, after the second or third time, you can kind of write it off and rationalize the idea that it's not worth it. It's not worth hounding these folks because there's a phrase in American English, I'm not sure if it's in British English, about it's not rocket science or something, something is not rocket science. If the other party is not discussing nuclear weapons, it's not rocket science to be able to walk away. We essentially can't walk away. The cost of letting them go on their own and defy us in this way is huge. And if I am them, if I try to get inside the mind of the folks who run that regime, why wouldn't they pursue that? Because it's going to make them permanently relevant to the United States. And I haven't, by the way, that tweet or post about 10 days ago about secondary sanctions on purchasers of Iranian oil, I haven't seen the implementing sanctions on that. I actually haven't seen the OFAC, Office of Foreign Asset Control, in the Treasury Department. I'm not sure those have gone into effect yet. That will be, in the words of Joe Biden, a big blank deal when that does go into effect, because that will basically get China into this mess. And the Chinese buy about 91% of Iran's total oil output. So I think that he can't walk away from that. The ability to curtail Iran, in his mind, is, in my opinion, going to depend on whether he can get China to stop buying their stuff.
The US basically told Iran that they must dismantle their 3 enrichment facilities, no weaponizations, not at all. Witkoff said that we're inviting Iran to be a member of the League of Nations. We're saying to Iran, you can be a better nation, we can do business with you, we can have a strategic relationship with you, but you can't have weapons, pretty much. So is that an enticing offer, Garrett, when you're looking at Iran? Are they getting enough out of that to basically be in a strategic relationship with the US?
Well, I think that the president, his difficult situation is he has some people on his staff and in the intelligentsia in the United States who want regime change. And I think he has to reject that in Iran. The middle ground is, yes, they cannot have nuclear weapons because essentially what they want, or what any state in their position would want, to be more technically accurate, is nuclear blackmail. That if they have nuclear weapons, they can blackmail people into submission or, to do a certain thing. What is difficult is there are neocons on the president's national security staff and on the outside who aren't content with just that. They're not content with Iran just not having nuclear weapons. They want a different regime in that country. Same thing with neocons in China. I worked for a gentleman named Peter Navarro in the first term. China is, it's very chaotic there, and Xi has his own problems. But what we have to, in my opinion, this is my perspective, we have to stop short of demanding that they change their leadership, because first of all, we have no guarantee that whatever comes after them is preferable to the current status quo. And secondly, we should learn from history, just like when we went into Iraq, we'll have to rebuild the nation. There is chaos that follows a regime change. So I think the neocons and the internationalists on the president's staff should be content with Iran not having nuclear weapons. And there's going to be some people who, even if we get that, Maddie, they will still keep pushing for Iran to go back to what it was in 1975. And again, I'm more of a constitutionalist. I think other nations can figure out for themselves which regime is best for them. It doesn't mean I don't hate communism and I don't speak out against it in any way I can. It simply means that when the United States has interfered in foreign countries' in their internal affairs, that's when countries rightfully hate us. I understand the opposition to American imperialism. I get it. And I don't want to do that in the 21st century any more than we already have.
Yeah, and I don't think that is a controversial ideology than what people might think, because there's been so much backlash when it came to Donald Trump's comments about making Gaza, you know, the Riviera of the Middle East. There was so much backlash from even Republicans, because basically they were like, we're not sending troops into Gaza. We're not having another war. We're not putting our soldiers into another war that we don't need to. We don't need to facilitate this. And the same with, I guess, the backlash after the Afghanistan withdrawal. So,
yeah, one thing on the Gaza, the Riviera, I think what people sometimes have an urge to, when they have an urge to yell at Trump, it's because they find him uncouth. So, for example, the True Social post that was AI generated of him in Gaza, one could argue that was completely uncouth. So you have the public pronouncement of it, which was quiche and AI generated, but the actual policy, like you said, is unlike Iraq and Afghanistan. There are no permanent troops or reconstruction teams building roads and, you know, primary schools for 6-year-old girls, which was a total disaster. So I think people need to remember that, you know, adults can, on the one hand, think that the president has uncouth AI-generated videos, but on the other, realize that this is preferable to anything George W. Bush ever did.
I want to move on to this Qatar plane, Garrett. Trump, he's reportedly set to accept this plane from the Qatari royal family. It's about $400 million, 747 plane. It will operate as Air Force One. It would, if he accepts this, this will probably be the biggest foreign gift ever received from the US government. But we don't know yet if he will receive this. But I want to get your thoughts on how you think the Israeli Prime Minister is viewing this situation if Donald Trump does accept a gift from Qatar, who, as we know, have been housing several members of Hamas.
Well, with regard to the Israeli Prime Minister, they're going to hate it. And the spokesmen in the United States who are close to Netanyahu, like Ben Shapiro, he has been talking about this for hours on his podcast. I have views that are diametrically opposed to Ben Shapiro most of the time, and I have views that are, quite frankly, diametrically opposed to Benjamin Netanyahu most of the time. So they're going to hate this because they have a long memory, and they've been fighting with these folks since the 40s through one cutout or another. So that nothing that the president is going to say to Netanyahu or his spokespeople like Ben Shapiro, and I'm not saying this with malice. When I call Ben Shapiro a spokesman, he will tell you straight up that he's a family friend of Netanyahu, as will Jared Kushner, by the way. Kushner hosted Netanyahu at his family home in the 90s. He actually slept in Jared Kushner's guest bedroom in New Jersey in his family home. This has all been reported. The issue that I probably can speak to more is the president, if he's to accept this, has to ensure from a optic standpoint that it doesn't go to him. So what the reporting has been is that the gift is to him. Even if, of course, it never goes to the president's personal account, that it only goes to his presidential library. If I were him, and knowing how the press has taken this, just make sure that the gift is to the country, because ABC, who broke the story, and I watched it very closely. The way they broke it on, I think, Saturday or Friday, is that it was going to his presidential library after his term in office. I think to kill this story, and what he should have done from the beginning, is just say, it's a gift between governments. I'm merely the elected president right now. This thing's not going to go to Donald J. Trump org or the Trump Presidential Library, because
going to go to whoever's in power, whatever president is in power.
It's a gift to the country. He should disclaim Because remember, I wrote about the Biden corruption voluminously, and
What would your reaction be? What would anyone's reaction be if this was Joe Biden, if this was Hunter Biden?
well, I would with Joe and Hunter, I would look very closely at whatever transfer agreement was papered over. Is it to the person individually? Because not gifts are exchanged all the time between governments, and they don't get ABC exclusives about them. So you just have to ensure that the gift is between the government, the Emir of Qatar, and the government of the United States of America. Then Trump can honestly say, this is literally not to me. I'm merely the elected president. I'm going over there. They're giving this to the people of the United States. When I leave office in 29, this isn't going down to Palm Beach. This isn't going to my library. If he says that, and that's what I would do with the Bidens, I would make sure that it was to the governments. Because then, we have this emoluments clause. This was litigated for years in the first term. It's right in the Constitution, Section 2, Article whatever. It's the dealing, with the U.S. president. You cannot accept foreign emoluments. So if it's not to Trump and it's to the government, that's the quickest way to get. If he wants to kill this story from a media perspective, it's just got to be to the government of the U.S. It can be to his private library afterwards. Just let. And if it were me, knowing how rogue Qatar is, I would maybe accept the gift on behalf of the government of the United States and then sell it on the secondary market. Because you don't know what is, just like with the Israeli pagers that blew up a bunch of Hamas fighters. We have no idea from a security perspective, we have no idea what they're going to plant in the plane, right? That's why I don't agree with it acting as Air Force One, because
That's why Trump said he said that they'd have to have have to have his entire defense team go through it and basically check. But again, you don't know. That's the thing. If it's not made in America, it's not made on the ground by the defense team. You don't know what they've hidden there. You don't know if there's any, spy equipment. You just don't know. We don't have long, Garrett, so I want to move on to get your thoughts on whether you think Donald Trump should be in this meeting, alleged meeting. We don't know if it's happening yet because the Kremlin haven't confirmed if Putin or any of his representatives will be there. But Putin and Zelenskyy, they're meant to be meeting in Turkey on Thursday to have a face-to-face discussion about ending this war or whatever they might think it is. Zelenskyy asked if Donald Trump can come. He says, I don't know where I'm going to be on Thursday. I've got so many meetings, as he's obviously in this Middle East trip, but I'm actually thinking of flying over there. There's a possibility of it. So do you think that's a good thing? Should Donald Trump be joining these two for a meeting?
I don't know if it's good. I think maybe a better angle would be, what does he have to lose? If he's already going to get crucified in the press for his meeting with Zelenskyy in the Oval Office, I think there's no reason why he shouldn't meet with them overseas, because he ensured the public or pled to the public during the campaign that this would get solved. It's still 4 months in and it hasn't. I don't see the downside to going over there and sitting with them in person. I think it'd be rare. No, it's not even conceivable that Joe Biden would do this or another, Republican president. So I would advise him to go, because this would allow him to control the narrative of the meeting. Right now, that meeting is like a tiger by the tail. I have no idea how that's going to go if Trump doesn't get involved. If Trump gets involved, he has a say on how it will go, and I would advise him to do so.
Agreed. Garrett Ziegler, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you, Maddie. God bless you.